Yavapai Broadcasting came to be in 1996 when the owner, Grant Halfley, came to town and purchased KVRD AM and FM, and at that time had a construction permit for a third station, KKLD. In the year 2000, we acquired three additional radio stations, KVNA AM, KVNA FM, and KZGL. And then through some attritions and trades and changes, we ended up with 4 radio stations and then acquired KQST and KLOD, which then eventually became KVNA FM again. So we've got a total of 6 radio stations, and somewhere in that vicinity about 10 years ago, we started a video studio to add video services to our repertoire with Yavapai Broadcasting, and that included a deal with the city of Cottonwood to run a cable channel on 2 different cable networks, and from there we grew to our own YouTube channel to go along with that. So how that works between the 2 entities, they are specifically 2 entities. So Yavapai Broadcasting deals with the radio stations, and Studio G Multimedia LLC deals with all of our video services. They are 2 entirely different companies. However, we do trade employees in and out quite often as need be, depending on the project.
So my favorite part of my job, I mean, it's a lot of the same, but it's always different. It's always different news. It's always different updates. We'll do a lot of events on location, and even though the setup's the same, the speakers are the same, the pop-up tents, our setup will look the same at every location. But it's always different people. It's always a different event. It's always different. So that's a lot of fun.
A lot of these are thank you awards for participating in events and fundraisers. Some of these are awards for news, being able to produce news that has been used by AP across the nation for our community, putting our community on the map, if you will. Some of it is just fun, things that we were able to participate with, and some of it is historical to the Old Town area in Cottonwood, Arizona. And of course, throughout the building, you'll find pieces of history, either through recording apparatus or parts that have been used on radio through the years for sports broadcasting or announcing or recording. Well, our radio stations have been a part of Northern Arizona community for better than 30 years now, and that includes our predecessor radio stations. And during that time, it's so essential that a radio station becomes part of its own market, not just because you're reporting news or playing music, but that you're involved with the events, you're involved with local sports and nonprofit organizations that you give a hand to, and you're able to participate. My day-to-day here at Yavapai Broadcasting is wearing a lot of hats. I used to have hair, but I actually lost it from friction, so changing hats so often. In small market radio, you do a lot of different things.
I'm the operations manager here at Yavapai Broadcasting, and I also program our top 40 station, the Q102 2.9, and our Flagstaff station, ESPN. So day to day, I start early in the morning. I come in about 5 o'clock and start prepping for my show that starts at 6. So I do mornings on the Q102 2.9, and then after that, music programming and scheduling and paperwork.
You've got the AM dial and you've got the FM dial, and those are going to be between certain frequencies. Those frequencies are allotted by the FCC, or the Federal Communications Commission. That gives us permission to broadcast on a particular frequency. It's not easy to get a radio station. And of course, frequencies can't interfere with other frequencies, so there might be multiple 95.9s through a state or through a region, but they have to be far enough away so that they don't interfere with one another. So technically speaking, how radio works is we use transmitters to transmit on our appropriate frequency. In the case of an AM radio wave, the entire antenna, the entire tower is the antenna. So an AM radio or an AM tower will be grounded underneath the ground by copper wires. Those copper wires should be distance from the tower as is the height of the tower. So if the height is 200 feet, you should have a radius of 200 feet in copper wires underneath that tower. That grounds the AM radio wave to the ground, which means that AM radio waves will now hover across the face of the earth. AM radio waves technically can go farther than FM radio waves because of the gravity attraction. With that said, if anybody has experienced this, where you turn your radio on at night and you can get a AM radio station from states away, it's because AM radio waves are knocked out of the sky by ultraviolet rays from the sun. So during the daytime, it may take 50,000 watts to cover a circle this big. But at nighttime, 50,000 watts without the sun can go states and states, which is really interesting. So originally, AM radio could cover most of the nation that way. You could listen to ball games at night from 3 or 4 states over. It was really fun and interesting. FM radio has no effect by ultraviolet rays. However, it is line of sight, which means that if you are broadcasting from the top of a mountain and you've got the curvature of the earth, eventually, no matter how strong your FM signal is, the curvature of the earth is going to keep it from going multiple states. So consequently, most FM radio towers are as high up in elevation as you can, so it's easier to broadcast down as it is across, simply because obstacles are going to get in your way. Hills, mountains, whatever the case might be. And certain areas of terrain across the United States that are flatter and more open, FM radio waves go a lot further there because they don't have anything that's going to get in their way. City buildings can get in the way of radio waves. Tunnels. As you go under the Civic Center in the Phoenix area, your FM radio will kind of fade out and disappear on you because it's line of sight and it's hard to get through all that concrete. So those are basically how the two different frequencies work in variation to each other. AM obviously was the beginning, FM was the new technology, and with any kind of new technology, what it took was it needed enough people that had FM radios for it to become viable as a future, and mostly that's when the rock and roll industry really started on the FM dial. It originated, with Elvis Presley on the AM dial, but then moved to the FM dial as the genre started to break into different sections, and that became exceptionally clear when you got to 1980s music. And rock and roll broke into dozens of different types of genres and music that had never been seen before as it started to niche into individual groups, which is part of the strength of radio, and it's part of the way that we actually sell radio and produce results for our customers. Where we become the biggest benefit for our customers is radio provides free entertainment and music, which is an art form, to our public. And in response to that, we provide commercials available to our sponsors. That's how radio makes its money. And that's how radio has made its money for decades and from the original beginnings of radio. Where you start to break up the difference between arts and science, and I have often told many of my clients that radio is part art and part science. So the science part is going to be associated with the different genres and what it's intended to reach. So, for example, we have a country station, we have a classic hits, we have a CHR, which is a current hit music station, we have an ESPN station, we have adult standard station, we have a AAA format, which is an album-oriented music station. And each one of those will attract a different kind of demographic and or lifestyle and or person, because everybody has their own preferences, which is absolutely fantastic. We give those preferences options in order to listen. A classic hits format will have more of a 35 to 55 kind of demographic. Country music will have a very wide demographic. from 18 to 78, whatever the case might be. However, how you play your country music will determine whether or not you're going to be more of an 18 to 35, a 25-54, a 35 to 70. It depends on what kind of portion of country music you're playing. A classic country is going to get an older demo. A modern hit country, which doesn't play anything that's older than 5 or 6 or 7 years old, is going to get a younger sway to that demo. In terms of that, a CHR, a current hit music station, will focus on hottest new hits. It will focus on more of that 18 to 35, maybe even more of a 14 to a 25, and then an 18-35, and then a 25-54. And I'm using different demographics because we will identify those as a P1, a P2, a P3. Okay. A position, P1 is a position 1. That is my station. That's the number 1 station that I go to. Okay. A P2 would be the number 2 station that I would flip to if my number 1 station is not either available or I don't like that song. And a 3 would be a number 3rd chance. Okay, or a 3rd opportunity. And that, of course, is talking about the presets on your, say, car radio or something along those lines. So a first demo is the primary demo that you're focused on, and in KQST's in that example, it's an 18 to 35, but a 25-54 is the second demo that we are looking for. And so we would expect people of that demographic to be using us as a P2 or a P3, if that makes some sense. And along those same lines, an ESPN station used to be swayed more toward a male audience because it was sports. However, the world has changed, and it's not nearly as heavily dominated as a male format as it used to be at one particular time. A AAA format is going to be a very eclectic format, in which it will also be a 35 to 50, 35 to 55 age demo. However, it has a lifestyle difference that it's looking to reach a more educated, maybe even a more financially astute audience. Not necessarily the same number of people, but a very specific niche of people. And with those options, we are then given the opportunity to sell to our customer, which ears would you like to purchase? Who would you like to reach? And that becomes part of the science behind this. The demographics of who you want to reach, the geography of where your customers are coming from, and where we can fish for new customers from that particular geographic area, whether you can draw county-wide, or is it going to be within a 12-mile radius of the location of your particular business, and it changes from customer to customer. That all becomes part of the science. The second part of it is the art. Now that we know who we want to reach and where they are, what do we need to say to them in order to influence them to use your business, use your products, your services? What influences that particular listener? Is it the quality of your product? Is it the price of your product? Is it the experience that you are trying to sell them? Some people have heard sell the sizzle. Okay, so you're selling what's really exciting about the product, whether it's a restaurant or it's a consumer product or a television, whatever the case might be. You're selling the specifics, the things that are absolutely phenomenal about that product. How you mix that in to a 30-second or a 60-second script now becomes part of the art. How do we get across the points that we need to make and actually communicate? Communication is one person is speaking, the other person has to be absorbing and understanding what that person is speaking, otherwise you haven't fully communicated.
So our station is a top 40 pop station, so we play the current hits, and we play them a lot. So our top song is going to play multiple times a day. So if you look at our playlist, it's pretty tight, but a month from now, it's going to be a lot different because, you know, the hits keep circling in. So we play current top 40 hit radio. pop station. So as far as that, we follow the charts pretty tightly, and it's programmed in-house.
Throughout history, it has never really truly been at the DJ's whim or choice of what music is going to be played. That has normally fallen within the direction of what is called a program director. Program director will choose what music is going to be played in what particular hour, and if that happens to be an hour that you're on the air, then normally that's what you play. Now, at times, you may have had 2 or 3 songs during the course of a particular hour that you got to choose as you wished to, but everything else was pretty much set for you. The music is set because that actually deals with some scientific reach equations as to what demographic you're trying to reach. So, for example, there are certain stations that will be out there that are going to be much more repetitive in nature than other radio stations, and that's by design, because the expectation is that audience is not going to be with you at the same length of time, what we call TSL, or time spent listening. So a lot of times the younger the demo, the shorter the TSL. Now that means that they want to hear, that group of people wants to hear the top 20 songs when they're listening to your radio station. So you have to play those top 20 songs a lot more often than, say, a different kind of format, which is not nearly as repetitive and will have a lot more what we call recurrence in that format, which is a great song, but it was new 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And in some cases, when you get to more classic type formats, it was a great song that wasn't necessarily the top 50 of that particular year, but it was still a pretty darn good song. And so those become more of a recurrent basis. And where those are placed and how those are placed are very strategic in how you are reaching the demo and how you are trying to obtain and hold your audience. If you are in a big market and you have a 1 or 2% share change in your overall reach, it is the difference between you getting a really gigantic raise or a pink slip and you have to go find a different job. So how accurate you are in choosing that music that attracts the listeners, that is really key and crucial to being a program director.
So what led me to radio is I had a friend who actually worked at a radio station. Her dad was the general manager of a radio station, and believe it or not, she was complaining about work one day, and I said, "You're kidding me." I said, "That sounds like an awesome job." And she said, "You know what? They're looking for someone to recategorize CDs at the time." So it was simply typing out name, artist, time, and just putting it on a sheet for weddings and whatnot, creating music lists. So it was kind of boring, but it was pretty exciting to be inside the walls of a radio station. So it started from there to doing weekend events, special events, and on location, setting up equipment, loading equipment, and basically I just kept working here. So it just kept building from there. So when I started on air, it was not natural at all. I was doing some production and some voiceover work, but as far as hosting a show, it was not natural at all. So it took a lot. We had a previous program director that worked with me a lot and always had a lot of confidence in me. So he made me feel comfortable, but naturally, no, it was not comfortable at all for me to be on the air.
Radio has gone through a lot of changes through the years. From the beginning, television was supposed to kill radio, and then Sirius and XM were supposed to kill radio. Video, MTV was supposed to kill radio, and none of it has actually occurred. Internet was supposed to kill radio. Internet radio was supposed to kill radio. And through my 30 years, there's been one specific demographic, or I'm going to say statistics, that I've actually looked at. When I started 30 years ago in radio, 96.3% of all Americans were listening to radio an average of 2.5 hours per day. Since that time, going through all of the changes, taking into consideration all the different competitions that have come about, the way that radio has been kind of separated, segregated, and in a sense, facing different battles from different directions. Radio has lost approximately 3 to 4% of our total overall reach and about a half an hour of listening time per average per day per American. Now, those are national concepts and national stats. But my point is, amongst all of the competition, to only lose 3 to 5% of your total audiences is quite amazing. Radio is still an essential piece to most Americans' lives. Now, do they use it exactly the same way as they used to use it? Most people understand the concept that people will still use radio within their vehicles, and that would be a dashboard connection. Okay. However, people still do listen to radio at home. People now have found ways to listen to radio via internet. And so many people will ask Alexa in order to listen to their favorite radio station and are able to do so online through their smart speakers. So along all of the competition, there has also been different ways in which we can connect with our audience and keep them with us. Since I've been in the business, I have seen incredible technology changes. When I started, we had an automated system for what was Verde that still used reel-to-reels and carts. A cart was like an 8-track tape that had tape inside of it, and you would record onto that tape. And the biggest technological change that I have really seen is going to a digital recording facility where we can record commercials right into the computer. We can edit, we can change, we can speed up, we can slow down, we can add music, we can add tracks. We can add 16 tracks to one commercial if we want to be that tremendous about that commercial. That's the biggest change that I've seen, because it used to be that you had to record the full 60 seconds and get it completely correct the first time, or you had to do it all over again and all over again. Now we have customers that come in and record their own commercials, and they do it line by line, and we can put it all together as if they recorded the whole thing in one full swoop. Externally, where transmitters has gone, it is unbelievable. The size of transmitters, the way the technology works for transmitters, the power usage that it doesn't use anymore is unbelievable. If you go back to the original days of radio, a AM transmitter would be a building that you walked into, quite literally. A 100,000 watt AM transmitter was an entire building. You walked into the transmitter to work on the transmitter. Nowadays, you can have a 100,000 watt AM transmitter or FM transmitter, and it will be the size of a closet. Another huge technological change that I have seen during my career has been in scheduling and billing. When I first started in radio, logs, or commercial logs, if you will, what commercials were going to play and what breaks, was all done by hand. So you literally went through schedules, and this person has got 2 spots that are going to run today, and we're going to put one at this time, and we're going to put one at this time. And oh, here's another customer that runs today, and they run 4 spots. And all of that was done by hand when I first started in radio. It was starting to become to the point where the software started to exist that could help you with that, but it was very expensive. And then as the software became more obtainable for most radio stations, that was a huge difference. And so now our software schedules all of our commercials for us and is able to break down competing type businesses and separate topics and like businesses and separate a business from its own commercial, so you don't end up with somebody with 3 commercials in the same break along those lines. And it's a complicated process, but it is a very garbage in, garbage out type software. Very specific. It does exactly what you tell it to do, so be careful what you ask for. Along those lines, that has been a huge breakthrough in radio just in general, because it has allowed us to be able to get more done with less people in that department for absolute sure.
Yeah, so when people want to get into radio, that's usually what they want to do is be on air, and sometimes those positions are hard to come by. So my advice to people is always be willing to do anything. You know, I was willing to sweep the floor, scrub the toilets if need be. Luckily, I never had to scrub a toilet, but I was willing to do it, you know, just to be at a radio station. So if people have the willingness to be a team player and fit in where their spots are available, you know, there's a spot for them, and opportunities, you know, do present themselves.
There are multiple careers all within one radio station, and it takes very specialized, specific skills. We need a radio station, a group of radio station needs people that can be on air. Those people need to have voice, art. They need to have presence, concept. They need to be able to project, read, connect with their audience. There is science involved with that, but there is mostly an art involved with that. And so our on-air people not only need voice, but they need a very good understanding of what it is that they're trying to accomplish, to become that connection with their audience for their particular shift. But that is only one group. That's the face of radio, if you will, the voice of radio that everybody understands radio to be. However, there is a whole business on the backside of this. There is the engineering part. Radio needs engineers that understand electronics, understand frequencies, understand all of the different kinds of equipment that we have progressed to, and the technology of radio just in the last 30 years has, oh my goodness, become unbelievable. Radio needs people that can manage people, but radio also needs sales. People that will go out on the street and talk to businesses and be able to sell a product that you cannot put in somebody's hand. It's intangible. I can't give you radio commercials and put them in your hand. I can put a cassette in your hand. I can put a DVD in your hand. I can put a CD in your hand. I can send you an email with your radio spots. I can't put radio advertising into your hand. And along those same lines, being able to sell an intangible takes a specific skill. So that's a whole different segment of people that are needed in radio for radio to continue to operate and work. Well, what do you need to get into it? Number one, a desire. If you have a love for radio, a lot of times that is the number one thing that you need. A lot of times the easiest way to get into radio, if you want to try to get into voice work, is to volunteer at a radio station, to become part of a roadie crew when they go out on location and interact with listeners and then get to know personalities along those lines, so that when a time comes up where a slot would be available for a weekend, guess what? You're there. They're thinking about you. From that point, getting into radio, do you need a college degree for it? No. Is it helpful? Yes. It would be helpful in order to understand the new technology and how we run radio, which mostly runs through computers. We don't play vinyl anymore. We don't play CDs anymore. All of that runs through computers, and being able to understand that software is something that would be good, not required. You don't have to have an education for it. It's something that we can teach on location. If you have sales experience outside sales experience, where you're talking to businesses and you're going to them to discuss their needs, their wants, and how you can help them, that is what we need as far as the sales end. And there are lots of ways to get into radio that way. As you go through the nation, the larger markets are very structured on dollars, finance, reach, peoples, and they're going to be rated, they're going to be judged on that. In a smaller market, you're judged on your connection to the community and your involvement in the community, and that becomes one of the major differences. It's really, it does happen, but it's very hard that you're going to find a celebrity on the air in the Phoenix market that is, going to be up and down your local grocery store aisle. Here it happens every day. And And it's just because the number of people, and I've got to say that I love our staff. Our staff is involved in the community. They're involved in local high school sports. They're involved with their own children's functions. They're out and about and participating in things that are important to them as a family in our own community, which is absolutely huge and crucial, but also participating in things that are important to our community and our community growth.